My name is Gary Warsham. I'm with the Remote.it Support and Applications Group, and today we are going to talk about how to use bulk registration in Remote.it. Here's our agenda. I'm not going to read it to you. There's actually quite a bit of details in the bulk registration topic, and as I'm going through some of the details initially, it may seem a little confusing. I would encourage you to hang on and just wait until we get to the demo where I hope it will all come together and start to make sense. You'll get the most out of this presentation if you know what Remote.it is and you've used it, and you want to enable a mass-produced device with Remote.it. And by mass-produced, I really mean that you have more than a handful of devices that you would like to set up with exactly the same configuration, and you want to make that easy and fast. And also, you need to be able to read at least one unique bit of information from the device, and you also need to know what it is ahead of time, and we'll get into that a little later. To get started, you need to decide which service or services and their TCP ports that you wish to connect to. With this information, you will create a product definition, which gives you a bulk identification code. Then you configure your device's OS image to report the hardware ID, registration key, and the bulk identification code. Now, here's where I'm indicating that it may get a little confusing because I haven't defined all of these things yet, but I will, so just hang on. Then you create a CSV, comma separated variable file. It's just a text file containing the information about the devices you're going to register, and it needs to contain the hardware ID and registration key and device name for each device. Then you create a bulk registration and upload the CSV file. And then you also publish it, and we'll get into that. Now, here's where I define what these things are. The hardware ID is a unique machine-readable identifier which you need to know in advance. And by advance, I mean you need to know it before the product is actually delivered to a customer and turned on. You don't need to know it before you do the bulk registration process. But if you have a manufacturing process and you can read the value off the device, you can actually do a bulk registration after the devices are manufactured. The registration key is another bit of information that is needed. It doesn't have to be unique. It can be the same as the hardware ID. It can be a different unique value, or it can even be a constant. And the default values are saved in these files under etc/etc/connectd as I've shown here. And then the bulk identification code is something that you get after defining your product. And that's saved in /etc connectd bulk identification code.txt. Okay, so when you create a product definition, you need to decide which services and ports you want to enable. You go to the menu on the left-hand side of your Remote.it web portal, click on Products, and then you will create and lock your product definition. And this is what that screen looks like. We will do this a little later, so just skimming through now. After you create a product definition, you need to create a bulk registration CSV file. And so then you go to the registrations page on the menu and download the template. And then you will need to edit this file to reflect the hardware ID, registration key, and device names that your products will use. And then you can also enter optional category information if desired. And when you upload and publish the bulk registration CSV file, you'll need to click on Create Registration, and this will show a dialog where you upload the file and enter some additional information, and then finally you publish the bulk registration. After you publish the bulk registration, each device takes about 30 seconds to appear in your account, and they will initially appear as offline. And when this process is completed, you'll receive an email that confirms that the registration process has completed. As far as the default expressions for the hardware ID and registration key, these have been configured for ease of use on a Raspberry Pi using the Raspbian operating system. And for the hardware ID, we use the MAC address of the network interface ETH0, And then the registration key is the MAC address of the network interface WLAN 0. If you're using a different operating system or a different hardware platform, these will sometimes be different names, but you can edit the name of the adapter that you want to use by editing those entries in the /user/bin connectd_options file, giving you some flexibility there. And then here's the command that we will run to confirm our bulk registration settings. And you also have to enable the startup of the connectd services. And here are the commands that you'll run to confirm that bulk registration works. I'm going to stop here and say you don't really need to do this, because one thing you can do to confirm that your bulk registration setup works is to simply reboot the device and then make sure that everything comes online within about 3 minutes. However, I always do this myself, because if there's any problem, you will see it here quickly first, and it's just a good confirmation that everything is running correctly. To confirm that your startup works, you need to reboot the device, and then once you can log back in at the console, run this command, and you should see one connectd entry for each service that you configured, which includes the device name, and then one connectd channel entry, regardless of how many services you've entered. And just as a side note, connectd channel is the daemon that's used to enable the bulk scripting functionality, whereas the connectd daemons are used for your actual TCP connections, for example, for SSH or VNC or a web server or whatever you're using. Now that you've confirmed that bulk registration works on your master device, you want to prepare the OS image so that it can be cloned onto other devices in manufacturing. In order to do that, you're going to run this command, sudo connectd_control reset, which is equivalent to doing a factory reset on your device. That will clear off all the configuration files that were downloaded. It does leave the bulk registration configuration in place. And by that, I mean the hardware ID, the registration key, and the bulk identification code are all left there, but the configuration files that I showed you downloading in the previous steps are erased. At that point, you can clone this device's OS image to copy onto other devices. Now, of course, for the new devices, in order to be able to bulk register, you'll need to upload and publish a CSV file containing the device unique information for those devices. I have to make a comment here about factory reset. This command, sudo connectd reset, as I said before, clears off all the downloaded configuration files from your device. In order to register this specific device again, you'll need to first delete the bulk registration which you had uploaded before that reference device, and then re-upload and publish the bulk registration CSV file. We recommend that you use the factory reset function with caution. Okay, so now I am going to do a demo. So give me a second here while I switch over to my remote.it account. So here I have my remote.it account, and I'm on the devices page, and there are no devices yet. So as I said before, the first thing I'm going to do is go to the products page here, and I don't have any products. So I'm going to create a product. And I'm just going to call this demo product. Try to spell things correctly. And the product platform, I'll use a Raspberry Pi. Now, this shows a bunch of different options here that you can use, and it does not change the functionality here if you choose the wrong thing. This is just to help track the types of devices that are being registered. But if you are using a device and you don't see an exact description of your product, choose the closest one. And if there's not one that is close, just choose any one, because the reality is it makes no difference to the functionality of bulk registration. So I'm going to pick Raspberry Pi because I am in fact using a Raspberry Pi. And then finally down here, the product scope is either private, public, or unlisted. For this particular demo, I'm going to select the private one, which means that you are the only person who has access to this product definition. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And then this shows up. And what I have to do now is go over to this little gear icon and open that up. And now I will start adding services. By default, the bulk service, or it's called the required bulk service, is here. And this gives you your device name. So that's required for everybody. I will add an SSH service, and the options here, these are the same options that you would get if you were using the interactive installer. But in this case, I'm simply going to add an SSH service. I'm going to call it console, and I'm going to put it on port 22. Finally, I'm going to check this to enable this service by default. So one thing that you can do, and we're not going to get into it, but you can choose that certain services will be enabled or disabled. And that's kind of an advanced topic. If you have any questions about that, I would encourage you to send me a message. But it does allow you to ship a device with services that are not necessarily enabled by default, and then you can turn them on later. Okay, so now I have my bulk service and my SSH console, and I'm going to just be happy with that. So I'm going to lock the product and press the submit button. And now I get this update, and clicking on the little eye icon, the little eye in the circle, gives you the product information and usage dialog. And the important thing to pick up here is the bulk identification code. So I'm just going to copy that because I'm going to need it in a bit. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bulk registration file. So I click on registrations here, and I'm going to download the registration template. And this is a CSV file by default. On my system, at any rate, it's going to open up in OpenOffice. And give me just a minute here to switch over to that. Okay, so here's the default CSV file that opens up, and it's got a registration key, it's got a hardware ID, and a device name. And in general, is you will fill this out with all of the registration keys and hardware IDs for your batch of devices. Now I'm going to switch again over to my console on my Pi. This is my Raspberry Pi, and this has no services configured on it, but it does have the ConnectD package installed. So one command that is very important to understand is the ConnectD control command. And if I type in sudo ConnectD control show, it will show me the current value of the hardware ID, registration key, and the bulk ID code. So I'm going to add these files right now. I do a sudo vi/etc ConnectD bulk identification code, and I will change that to this uh, bulk identification code that I got from the product information. And then I write that. And if I run ConnectD control show, again, you can see that now the bulk ID code is filled in. So earlier I showed you where there are text files that you can edit to put in your own values. And I also described that if you delete these files, you will get the default settings, which are based on the MAC addresses of the ETH0 and WLAN0 network interfaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually delete the hardware ID, and I'll run the ConnectD control show again. And you see this now shows up as a MAC address. And I'll do the same thing for the registration key. And you can see that I have the hardware ID there. And I'm going to copy and paste this into my spreadsheet. And one moment here. Okay, done that. And come back and get the registration key and paste that in there. And now I'm going to go back and show you my spreadsheet. So you can see now that I have the registration key here, the hardware ID here, And I've called this my device 001. I'll just give that a different name. I'll call that Monday demo. And the category information here, you can fill this out. I think in our current implementation, only the first three category columns are visible in the device list. And this is information that if you know what it is at the time that you're putting together a bulk registration, you can put this information in here. In the one example where this was used, we had a customer that was shipping products into school districts, and they would use the category information, for example, to represent the actual school, the classroom, and the name of the teacher that that device corresponded to. But these can be used for anything, or you can simply ignore them, which is probably what most people do. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to create a bulk registration, and I'm going to call this Monday Demo BR for bulk registration. And then I'm going to go find my file that I just made. And then I'm going to choose the product on which it's based. I only have one, so it's going to be demo product. And now I click on register. And what you'll see here is that this comes up here now and it has entered the status of configured. If you click on this, it will show you, again, here I just have one of them, but if I had a bunch of them, it would show you all of them in there. And the next thing I have to do is I have to publish this. So there's a little confirm box. And publishing a bulk registration, I said before, will take about 30 seconds per device. Now, if I go back here to my device list, I don't see anything yet. I'll go back to registrations. This is pre-registered now. Take a look at that. The status is pre-registered. And if I go back to devices, I now see this. Now, again, you'll notice that its status is offline. So what this has done is it's created a placeholder in my account for the device, but we haven't started up the device. So when you do bulk registration, all the devices will show up in your account before they're ever plugged in or turned on. So now I'm going to return to my device. Okay, so I did the connectD control show. And the next thing I need to do is I need to enable the startup of the services when the device boots. And first I'll write sudo systemctl enable connectD. And then the other one is schannel, which, as I said before, is used for bulk scripting. As I mentioned already, I could at this point reboot this, but I want to show you in the event that you have to debug something, how you will see what really happens when you do a bulk registration. These scripts are run automatically when you boot. The first thing we do is this command sudo connectd underscore control minus v deprovision. And this goes off and it finds the configuration that we have set up, and assuming that the hardware ID and the registration key match what I've uploaded in a CSV, then these configuration files will be downloaded, as you see here. If there's an error or if you made a mistake, then you'll see an error here, and then whatever that is will be something that you'll want to send to us at support so we can help you figure out what's going on. And then the second command is sudo connectd underscore control minus v provision all. And this actually will start up all the connectd daemons. And what will happen over here in my account, the status has come online, and I can click on this and see that my SSH service is active. And I make a connection just as I would have to a device that had been configured using the interactive installer. So the next thing that I'm going to do here, and I'm sorry to keep going back and forth, but I'm going to reboot the device. This will terminate that script and come back to screen here. All right, so So there it is again. And then just to confirm, I'm going to reconnect using SSH to this device. And we'll just make sure all the services are running as we expect. All right. And then just to confirm that all of the daemons are running the way we think they should on this command, which is in the slides. And I don't know if you can see that. I'll run it again with a little wider screen. But you can see I've got ConnectD S channel. This is the S channel. There's just one of those. And then there are two entries here for ConnectD itself. One of these corresponds to the device name service, and one of them corresponds to the SSH service that I configured. So this pretty much is the end of showing you how to set up and configure bulk registration. I know that went pretty fast, and there are a lot of different things, but that is how it works. And the only difference between what I just did and what you would normally do in a mass production situation is you wouldn't just do one device in a bulk registration. That doesn't make any sense. Typically, people are doing 10 or 100 or more at a time. Another thing that you can do, which I didn't explain, but you can transfer devices to another account, and you can actually transfer an entire bulk registration to another account. Now, of course, this all depends on how you're actually using the product, but if you wanted to initially bulk register devices to your own account, and then you had customers who had their own accounts, and you wanted to transfer essentially ownership of this group of devices, then you can transfer a bulk registration. Here's my Monday demo BR, and if I want to transfer these, I click on this little arrow and it'll say bulk registration transfer. Now you have to set up contacts. I haven't created any contacts for this demo, but in order to do that, you would go over here and create contacts just like you do for sharing or transfer of devices which were registered using the interactive installer. Okay, so let me just switch back to the slides here. I'm going to see if we have any questions that came in. Let's see. Can you use bulk registration for more than 10 raspberries? The answer is absolutely. I think the limit of how many devices that you can put into a single CSV file is 1,000. If your initial bulk reg contains 10 devices and later you want to add another 10, does one just upload the updated CSV file? Okay, that's a very good question. So here's how it works is that you wouldn't update the CSV file, you would create a new one. So you can reuse the same bulk identification code for many bulk registrations. And the way we imagine this actually working is that a manufacturer will, say, have a monthly production of devices, and you've got some sort of gadget and you're going to make 100 of them this month, and so you'll have a CSV file that represents those 100 devices. Next month you make 150, and so next month you will create a new CSV file. You'll create the registration associating it with the same bulk identification code that you already had. Now, if your needs change and you want a different set of services, then you create a different product and you use that instead. But as long as you're keeping your service configuration the same, then you can continue to use that same bulk identification code with a new CSV file for each batch of devices. Is there a limit on the number of different registrations? Well, not that I can think of. I mean, you can have multiple product definitions, which would be, different configurations of services, and there's no inherent limit on those. I mean, at a certain point, you could say, well, if I had 10 billion of them, would I run out of disk space? And the answer is probably yes. But in terms of practically speaking, there's no imposed limit on it. And in my own testing, I've certainly had dozens of them at one time. And so that's different product definitions. And then also bulk registrations based on the same product definition. There's no inherent limit on that. It says MAC addresses are easy to guess or printed on package box. How to prevent others to claim the devices by guessing MAC address. Well, so number one, you have the bulk identification code, which is contained in the file, the /etc connectd bulk identification code.txt. And this code is associated with your account. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, even if somebody has your MAC address, I'm not entirely sure what they would do with it to try to claim your device. The other point I would make is that you are not limited to using MAC addresses, and you can also do things like edit the definitions of the expressions that create the hardware ID and the registration key to, for example, you could take a MAC address and you could append a fixed string on it as long as you know what it is. So the expressions that are used for hardware ID and registration key are entirely up to you. The use of the MAC address of the ETH0 and WLAN0 network adapters is just a shortcut and convenience for people using Raspberry Pi. However, a lot of our customers who are using this, in fact, use something else, which would be their own product serial number, which they store in a text file. And then as part of the boot up script, we just need to make sure that that value gets copied over into the correct place for use as either the hardware ID or the registration key. So if you have any questions about how to adapt the specifics of your system or how to edit the expressions used to generate the hardware ID and the registration key, please send a message to support@remote.it and we'll help explain how it works and give you some ideas for other things that you could do if you are concerned about people guessing your MAC address. But I think the bottom line of my answer to that is that the MAC address or the hardware ID or the registration key are not the only things that are required. And if somebody has console access to your product and can get in there and look at all those files, then you've got a problem anyway, because you've given your customer console access to your product and they could do anything they wanted to with it. They could change the bulk ID. So do send an email to support if you have further concerns on that. Here are some additional resources that you can use. The bulk registration is pretty thoroughly described over at our docs site at docs.remote.it. We also have documentation downloads at docs.remote.it. That's all of our how-to guides. Our help desk and knowledge base is off at this other Zendesk site. We have a community forum at forum.remote.it that you're welcome to send us messages or look for issues that maybe other people have faced. And then also we have a YouTube channel to which we will be in a few days uploading this video. And if you have any questions or problems, we certainly encourage you to send an email to support@remote.it and I will answer it personally, or one of our friendly engineers may get involved to help.